Okay, today we are strapping into the rig suit, so to speak, for a deep dive. We're looking at a game that, well, it sits in this really weird spot. Dead Space 2. Critical darling, but also kind of a commercial headache. Yeah, our mission today is to unpack the source material, try and figure out how Visceral Games hit this, almost perfect note between pure action and deep psychological terror. But, and this is the core question, isn't it? If the game was that good, why did its own success end up causing such huge problems for the whole franchise?
It's a fascinating paradox, really, because it puts every single design choice under this intense microscope. You look at the reviews, the critics, they didn't just like Dead Space 2. A lot of them flat out said it was better than the first one, which was already considered a classic.
Yeah.
We're talking Metacritic scores up around 90 out of 100. And yet, the publisher, Electronic Arts, they went on record saying it was essentially a commercial failure, which is wild. Right, so where do we start unraveling that?
Well, I think you have to start with Isaac Clarke himself. It's 3 years after the Ishimura incident from the first game. He's on this massive space station, the Sprawl orbiting Titan. And he's not doing well. He's got marker-induced dementia.
And the big change, he's not silent anymore.
Exactly. He has a voice. He has agency. And that shift, moving him from just being the terrified engineer taking orders to, well, a focused, almost hardened survivalist, that narrative choice really underpins all the gameplay changes that came with it. He's changed, so the game had to change too.
Okay, let's get into maybe the most talked about aspect of its design, this idea of fairness. You read player accounts and they all say the game is incredibly difficult, right? Especially if you try Zealot or, a God forbid, hardcore mode.
Oh yeah, hardcore, only 3 saves.
Right.
For the entire game, it's brutal.
Brutal, yeah. Yet everyone seems to agree it feels extremely fair. How does a horror game beat you down that hard but still make you feel like it's playing by the rules?
It comes down to some, let's say, genius manipulation happening behind the scenes. The developers put a ton of work into the Necromorph AI. Specifically, how enemies behave depending on whether you, the player, can actually see them or not.
Wait, hang on. So they're deliberately making the enemies dumber if you're not looking. Isn't that kind of cheating for the player? Doesn't that risk shattering the immersion if people figure it out?
You'd think so, but actually it does the opposite. It enhances the terror because you generally only notice this subtle manipulation if you're actively trying to break the game or, someone points it out like we are now.
Okay, so how does it work in practice?
So the core example everyone brings up is the slasher. If one spawns behind you, right, and you're maybe dealing with something in front of you, focused ahead, that slasher behind you won't just sprint full tilt at your back.
It won't.
No, it'll often just walk.
Yeah.
Slowly. It might keep its distance until you either turn the camera and spot it, or until it gets close enough for one of those scripted grab attacks. The AI's aggression level is literally tied to your line of sight.
Wow. Okay, and the effect of that. I mean, Dead Space 2 has that super close third-person camera, right? It's practically glued to Isaac's shoulder.
Extremely close. And in almost any other action game, that kind of camera angle would lead to constant cheap shots from enemies you just couldn't see. It would be incredibly frustrating.
But here, because the necromorphs are sort of politely waiting off screen.
Exactly. They're programmed to be less aggressive when you can't see them. So the camera, instead of feeling like a hindrance, actually becomes part of the tension management. You feel claustrophobic, sure, but you don't feel constantly sucker punched unfairly from off camera.
That's actually brilliant. It lets them keep that intense close-up perspective without breaking the game's feel of fairness.
Precisely. And it ties in perfectly with the immersion, too. Remember, that Dead Space famously has no traditional HUD. Your health, your stasis, your ammo count, it's all integrated visually onto Isaac's rig suit.
Right, the diegetic UI.
Yeah. So by subtly managing the off-screen threat, the game keeps you focused on what's in front of you, relying on that limited beam from your suit spotlight, reading the cues on Isaac's back. You spend less time worrying about unseen attacks and more time just soaked in the atmosphere.
Okay, so 99% of the time it's meticulously fair, thanks to this hidden AI logic. But, even masterpieces have flaws. The sources we looked at definitely point out moments where that fairness seems to break down, and those moments stick out because the rest is so well-tuned.
That's where the tension comes back in a negative way, right? Because the game trains you to expect solvable, predictable threats. When that expectation is suddenly violated, it feels really jarring. Immensely frustrating even.
And the sources pinpoint 2 main areas.
Yeah, 2 specific sequences get called out repeatedly. The big fight on the solar array elevator and the encounter with the final boss. In those sections, apparently the enemy spawn patterns shift from being predictable to being, well, randomized.
Ah. So if you're trying for that perfect run, especially on hardcore,
It feels cheap. Suddenly, the difficulty isn't about mastering a pattern. It's about luck of the draw. And in a game that otherwise prides itself on readable encounters, that randomization really grates on players aiming for mastery.
and speaking of things that grate on players, especially repeat players, we absolutely have to talk about the unskippable cutscenes.
Oof. Yes. The bane of hardcore runs everywhere.
If you die, particularly in hardcore where every second counts and those 3 saves are like gold dust, you might have to sit through several minutes of cinematics you've already seen multiple times.
And the developers, or at least the director, admitted this was kind of intentional. It adds friction. Right at the start of the game, you're looking at nearly 4 minutes, I think, before you even gain control of Isaac.
4 minutes.
Yeah. And across the whole campaign, you'd probably rack up something like half an hour of completely unskippable, non-interactive content. It's a design choice that really amplifies the consequence of death.
How?
Well, it forces this mental calculation, doesn't it? If you die after making maybe 10 minutes of progress, you have to ask yourself, is that progress worth sitting through that mandatory intro sequence again? It adds this layer of psychological weight, this dread, to every single encounter. Makes the stakes feel higher.
That pressure, that anxiety, it brings us nicely to the big shift in genre everyone talks about. The sources all seem to agree Dead Space 2 deliberately pulled an Alien to Aliens move.
Yeah, that's the common comparison. Moving away from the slower, more isolated, pure survival horror of the first game and leaning much more into action horror.
Was that just chasing trends, or is there a reason within the game's own logic?
Oh, there was definitely a narrative justification, and it goes back to Isaac. He's not the same guy. He survived the Ishimura. He knows what necromorphs are, how to fight them. He's got better gear, more experience. He's still terrified, obviously, but he's also adapting.
He's weaponized his trauma, almost.
In a way, yeah. One source called him a killing machine. The action had to escalate to reflect that Isaac wasn't just running and hiding anymore. He was actively fighting back, trying to survive not just the monsters outside, but the ones inside his head, too.
Let's talk about those internal demons. Because his marker exposure means he's constantly haunted by Nicole Brennan, his dead girlfriend.
Right. And she's not just a ghost story element. She's presented as this manifestation of his intense guilt and trauma. A hostile hallucination constantly challenging him, whispering doubts, sometimes even physically attacking him in his visions, asking him to make us whole. It's deeply unsettling.
It really grounds the horror, makes it personal for Isaac.
And this internal struggle is mirrored visually in the environment. The sprawl is a much more varied setting than the Ishimura. You've got shopping malls, apartments, schools, even this massive, creepy Unitology church.
Which could have diluted the horror, maybe? Made it feel less oppressive than the constant dark corridors of the first game.
It could have, yeah. But the developers were smart. They used lighting almost like it was its own character. Lights are constantly flickering, changing color, failing altogether. It reflects Isaac's own degrading mental state. Things are literally falling apart around him, mirroring his mind.
That's a great detail. I read that the lighting design wasn't just random flickering either. They actually looked at classical art.
That's right. It's fascinating. The art team specifically mentioned studying painters like Rembrandt, masters of chiaroscuro, the dramatic use of light and shadow.
So using the light from Isaac's rig suit as the main source?
Exactly. It carves out this small pocket of relative safety, illuminating the immediate threat, while everything else just falls away into this deep, oppressive darkness. It's that contrast that creates the mood. Connecting Dutch masters to designing levels filled with horrifying space monsters. That's the kind of thoughtful detail that elevates the whole experience.
Okay, following this thread of psychological pressure, we have to talk about what might be the single most anxiety-inducing moment in the entire game. Maybe in any horror game.
I think I know where you're going. The Noonlight Diagnostic Machine.
That's the one, near the end of the game. The sequence is just pure psychological warfare waged against the player.
It really is. So Isaac has to use this machine, right, to pull crucial data about the marker out of his own brain. And the method is, well, it involves lowering this incredibly fine needle directly into his eye. Specifically into the lateral geniculate nucleus. Now, for anyone listening who isn't up on their neuroanatomy, the LGN is basically the brain's relay station for vision. All the raw data from your eyes gets processed there before heading off to the visual cortex.
So the machine isn't just threatening physical pain, which is bad enough. It's threatening to destroy his very ability to see, to perceive reality, which, for a character already plagued by hallucinations, is like the ultimate targeted horror.
Absolutely. And the director apparently stated that the whole point of this sequence, this minigame, was to make your anxiety as a player perfectly mirror Isaac's terror in that moment.
And the gameplay itself, how does it achieve that?
It's deliberately designed to be excruciatingly tense. You have to use the controller's analog stick very, very carefully to align this targeting laser onto Isaac's pupil. While you're doing this, you have to monitor his heart rate, which is displayed on screen and steadily rising. That's your timer.
So you need precision under immense time pressure.
Exactly. If you fumble the alignment or if you let his heartbeat spike too high before you lock it in, the machine, well, it malfunctions catastrophically. The needle just plunges straight through his eye socket.
Resulting in one of the most gruesome, memorable failure scenes in gaming.
Truly iconic, yeah. But even succeeding is rough. If you manage it, the needle pierces the iris correctly, but you still see blood and, eye fluids welling up and spilling down his face.
What makes it so effective, I think, is that you are in direct, delicate control of the instrument of potential torture. It's not a quick time event, it's not a cutscene, it's your unsteady thumb that could cause this horrific outcome. It's a test of nerve, pure and simple.
Absolutely. A masterclass in using gameplay mechanic to generate psychological stress. The design brilliance here, it's undeniable, but now we have to pivot. We have to go from the internal pressures on Isaac Clarke to the harsh external pressures of the video game industry. This is where that critical acclaim crashed headfirst into commercial reality.
Right, because despite being hailed as a masterpiece, selling pretty well initially, EA wasn't happy.
Not at all. It shipped nearly 2 million copies in its first week, which sounds great. And it eventually sold around 4 million copies worldwide across its lifetime. Again, sounds respectable for a horror game, but the budget. Various sources estimate the total cost development, plus a huge global marketing campaign, was somewhere in the region of $120 million.
Wow, wait, $120 million for a sequel in a relatively niche horror franchise? That feels incredibly high, like almost destined to be seen as a disappointment unless it sold Call of Duty numbers.
That's precisely the problem, isn't it? That massive budget set expectations sky high to recoup $120 million and actually turn a decent profit, especially considering the publisher's cut, retail margins, platform fees. They probably needed to sell significantly more than 4 million copies, maybe closer to 6 million, even more.
And selling 6 million copies of a hardcore M-rated action horror game, it's a tall order.
A very tall order. So from EA's perspective, despite the rave reviews and the solid but not blockbuster sales, Dead Space 2 didn't meet its financial targets. It was a commercial disappointment.
And that disappointment had immediate and pretty devastating consequences for the next game, Dead Space 3.
Absolutely. The pressure came down from the publisher. The next game needed to be bigger, broader, more mainstream. It needed to hit those massive sales numbers that Dead Space 2, despite its quality, couldn't reach.
So the conclusion wasn't, let's make another tightly focused masterpiece. It was, we need to change the formula to appeal to more people.
Exactly. And that led directly to the controversial decisions in Dead Space 3, things mandated by the publisher to, quote-unquote, broaden the appeal, which ended up alienating a lot of the core fan base.
Like forcing in co-op multiplayer.
Which fundamentally undermines the sense of isolation that's so key to the series' horror, right?
Right. And pushing for microtransactions for crafting resources.
Yeah, that felt pretty egregious to many players, and just generally cranking the action dial up even further, losing that careful, terrifying balance that Dead Space 2 had absolutely perfected.
So the commercial failure of a critically acclaimed game essentially forced creative compromises that ultimately helped kill the franchise.
That's the tragic irony of it. Those external business pressures completely overrode the creative vision that had made the series so special in the first place.
It leaves us with a really potent question, doesn't it?
It really does. And it's something for you, the listener, to think about. Dead Space 2 arguably mastered the art of creating immersive fear. It did it through incredibly smart, player-respecting design, through deep character work, through giving the player agency even in terrifying situations. But when a creative masterpiece like that is burdened with a budget so enormous that it demands blockbuster, mass-market sales figures just to break even, what's the real cost? Can a game in this high-stakes, high-budget industry actually be too well-crafted, too focused, too good for its own commercial survival?